evening to everyone who's on the phone. I understand we have a large number of participants joining tonight's executive committee meeting. Let me just say at the outset that for those of you who have not been a part of our meetings in the past, we will introduce ourselves momentarily in accordance with the agenda. I will remind several people that if you're not speaking, please put your phone on mute. The background noise does not help with having an efficient meeting. So again, put your phone on mute if you're not speaking, or if you can just go on, turn your speaker off, that would be helpful. Number two, um, I understand that there are certain items tonight where several people have requested to speak. Just to manage expectations at the outset, everyone will not have the opportunity to speak. There will be more of a concise way that a representative could communicate the concerns of the community when we get to the topic that warrants that level of participation. And with that, I'm going to pick up with the agenda and introduction of committee members. I am Lenny Singletary, Chair of Community Board 2, and I will now ask the first Vice Chairperson to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Leonard Jordan. I'm the first Vice Chair, Community Board 2, and also Chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee.
And the second Vice Chair?
It's Barbara Zoller Gringer, and I'm also on the Parks Committee.
Representatives for land
Hopefully you can hear me. Carlton Gordon, for landmarks and land use.
youth education and cultural affairs.
Hello, Betty Freibush, Chair of Youth Education and Cultural Affairs. Hello, everyone.
Thompson Manning, co-chair.
Committee for employment and job creation. Bill, I saw your lips moving, but I didn't hear anything. Try one more time for me. All right, so we're having some technical difficulties with Bill Flanoy. I see he took himself off. Try one more time, Bill. Try one more time. There you go. Now we can hear you. Say it again for him. We can hear you.
Flanoy, Chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee.
All right. So as the meeting goes on, Bill, I'm gonna need you to say it with your chest. That's great. Is your vice chair on again? Okay. The representatives for health, environment, and social services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brandon Smith, Chair of Health, Environment, Social Services.
Transportation, we have a representative for transportation. So they may be joining momentarily. I believe I have every committee. Did I miss anyone inadvertently?
Oh, Jessica's here.
Oh, we have our wonderful secretary. How could I forget?
Hi, everyone.
What would we do without the secretaries? Thank you, Jessica. Okay, great. Can I have an approval of tonight's agenda?
Moved.
Thank you, Brendan. Can I have a second? Betty. So let the minutes reflect that the request for approving the agenda was by Brenda Smith and second Betty Freibush.
It was Barbara.
No, I only heard Betty. I'm sorry, Barbara. I only heard Betty and Brendan, so apologies. So what I said is what I will go with. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Great. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from April 27th, 2020 for the executive committee meeting? Are there any noted corrections?
Made corrections to the district office.
Barbara, I'm gonna need you to speak up.
I submitted corrections to the district office.
Okay, great. Anybody else who had material edits for the minutes? If they're not, feel free to send them to the district office. Okay, great. Next item on the agenda item number 4, Committees for Action, Finance, and Personnel. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jordan, who serves as the first vice chair of the Community Board and the chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee. Mr. Jordan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singletary. Good evening, everyone. So this is a review of the fiscal year 2021 budget, which we'll ask to be voted on tonight. The committee met last Thursday on May 20th, and we went over the various line items, and also just want to make note of the fact that we were asked, the entire every community board was asked to process a reduction to the original budget that we were allocated due to the COVID-19 situation. So we were asked, I think all community boards were asked to drop $8,712 from their total budget that was allocated. So in our case, we had done that. We come out to about $258,000 total. The amount, what we're going to discuss today, or actually what I'm going to present to you today, is just a budget for OTPS, which is other than personal services. The rest of the budget is devoted to salaries. There's a handout. I don't know if everybody got the handout. It should be on the back of the handout, or maybe a second page. We had fiscal year 2020 that we had approved last year for $12,843. And we have fiscal year 2021, which we had, the committee voted on, and that was for $9,550, which shows a decrease of about $3,700 approximately. I'm going to go through the line items so that you just have some understanding. First line item is code 100, office supplies. We had $750 budgeted last year, with $600 this year. And let me just preface the rest of my comments with the fact that we did go over this with staff, and they had agreed that they would be able to operate with what we had budgeted for 2021. For the storehouse, we used to have a line item that we had budgeted there, but we didn't, that was a requirement for us to purchase stuff from the storehouse, but that's no longer a requirement at this point. Food and forage is actually just water, the water cooler rental and the water itself. What we anticipate is we won't use as much since that's a monthly charge. So we budgeted $144 instead of $168 from last year. Postage, we have sufficient funds in escrow. Matter of fact, we have a total, actually our use of postage and the postage meter has been decreasing. I would say slowly decreasing, but it's decreasing even more than what we anticipated. We have a total of $4,313 in escrow right now, which would last us, and actually even with our use still decreasing, which would last us a number of years. So we did not budget anything for postage. Data processing supplies, that amounts to toner for the all-in-one printer that we have. From $650 we reduced that to $400. A contingency, data processing equipment. We had purchased just about all new data processing equipment, that is laptops and desktops, for the office this year in fiscal year 2020. So as a contingency, we just left $800 in there. Of course, if that's not used, we can also move that someplace else. Phone and internet, that's a standard charge, $2,960. We actually pay that through DCAS, and that's been a standard charge for the past few years anyway. Rental office equipment, that's the postage meter. We have to pay a lease for that meter, and that's $550, and we had budgeted the same amount we did last year. Local city travel and meals, that is not only meals for the executive committee, when the executive committee meets, of course, that doesn't include the meeting that we're having now, but when we meet in person, there's a modest meal allowance that's allowed, as well as travel and meal allowances if necessary for the staff. So we had $2,800 budgeted in fiscal year 2020. We reduced that to $2,000 for this year, for fiscal year 2021. Now, I should also mention that the fiscal year does not start until July 1st. So this fiscal year 2020 ends on June 30th. Office equipment maintenance, that's the printer maintenance. It's really done by a per page usage. And the staff agreed also that we could reduce that from $630 from the last fiscal year to $400 for fiscal year 2021. Printing, that really involves letterheads, envelopes, business cards, $350 we had budgeted before. We reduced that to $200. Don't think we're actually going to use that, but still that's there in case we have to replenish letterheads or business cards or whatever. As I said before, that money could be transferred to other line items if needed. And staff training, we had a budgeted $2,000 in fiscal year 20. We had reduced that to $1,500. We still thought that was an important thing that we should not, that we should budget some money there. And that was for fiscal year 2021, $1,500. So all told, our new budget for fiscal year 2021 is $9,554, and those were the line item explanations. Now, so Mr. Singletary, I'm open to any questions.
So, given that this is a budget item, this is something that should be voted on. So let me entertain a motion to accept the budget as presented.
I so move.
Thank you, Barbara. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carlton. Any discussion on the motion from board members?
Our staff will still remain the same. This doesn't knock out any of the hard-earned staff that we've been able to obtain recently.
As hard as it took for us to get the staff, we are not trying to do anything to get rid of the staff. So please remove that, strike that from the records. Don't let that seep out in the air. We are happy with the employees that we have. If you have any questions, call me. I will hug you in spite of COVID, but don't go anywhere. I need everybody who's here. All right. So
no hugs necessary.
Yeah. If they listen to you, I want to hug everybody. So please don't change. Any other questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I just want
Aye.
Jessica to know that Juliet's on the call too. I've been on the call since Jessica was introduced for the record keeping. Okay, thanks.
Got you.
Thanks.
Hi, Juliet. That's the cool thing about WebEx. We can see when you join, so we knew you were here. That's fantastic. Sticking with the motion. Hold on. Sticking with the motion. I might want to do this right. Is there any? So everybody is voted. Are there any abstentions? Are there anyone in opposition? Okay, great. It sounds unanimous. Now, who had a question?
No, Mr. Singletary, I just forgot to mention to everybody that the committee had voted to accept the new budget 700.
Yeah, thanks. That's kind of mute now, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I love the fact we're being thorough. That's great. So moving on to agenda item number 5, we have new business. There's a Landmarks Preservation Commission certificate of an appropriateness application. Carlton, are you prepared to take this part of the agenda?
All right, let's start. The first one is 30 St. Felix Place in the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. It's a proposal for 24 stories, new building on that lot. It's being proposed by the Brooklyn Music School with a developer partner. And the idea is that the Brooklyn Music School would get additional workspace, rehearsal and performance space, and would benefit from the income from this property.
Is that it?
That's the introduction, yes.
Dan Kaplan from XF Collaborative, I believe, is on the call. Dan, do you want to share the presentation and begin?
Yes, I will. You need to give me permission, I believe, to do that. It's D. Kaplan. Thank you. Bear with me. Can everybody see that?
Yes, now we can.
Yes.
Very good. And can you see my cursor moving?
Actually, yeah, we can see the mouse very small. Is there any way that you can make this full page as opposed to within the Adobe
Sure.
Reader?
Yes, absolutely. Better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. So there are two people I would like to introduce that are going to present with me. First is Brian Kelly from the Gotham organization, and also that he'll precede me, and then after me is Shelby Green from the chair of the Board of Directors of Brooklyn Music School. As was said before, my name is Dan Kaplan. I'm a senior partner at FX Collaborative.
Dan, hi, this is Lenny Singletary, Chair Committee Board 2. I don't mean to be rude and interrupt your presentation. So this is going to be my last question before I let you get on your flow. How long do you think your presentation is going to take?
I think from beginning to end, it's no more than 15 minutes.
All right. I would appreciate if you made it 10, but if you need 15, make it 15.
I'll just had my second espresso, so I'll talk really fast.
Brevity goes a long way at Community Board 2, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Brian, do you want us to go ahead?
Yes, with brevity in mind, hi everybody, it's Brian Kelly from the Gotham organization. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I believe we briefed the Land Use Committee in December of 19 on this proposal. That was a voluntary meeting to get the board up to speed on what our goals and objectives were. For the site that we own at 130 St. Felix Street, we bought that property back in 2015. Quickly, the Gotham organization is a 100-year-old firm. Our expertise, forte, and track record is in public-private partnerships, creating affordable housing, community facilities, and working in public-private partnerships. We bought the property in 2015 with the idea, after being contacted by leadership at Brooklyn Music School, to help create an expansion in combination with market rate and affordable housing. The proposal that we've reached at this point is the result of a number of iterations over the last number of years, which would result through getting the certificate of appropriateness referenced through landmarks. Subsequently to that, we would apply for a rezone, so a ULURP, which we would be in front of you next year for. The upzone of this property would be from a C61 to a C64 and C66. It would expand our zoning lot that we share with One Hanson, an iconic building in the district, to include Brooklyn Music School. It would be 164,000 gross square foot development that includes a 20,000 square foot expansion for BMS. The height of it wouldn't exceed 285 feet, or the shoulder of One Hanson would include up to 120 homes. That would include 30% set aside as moderate income affordable home ownership. Affordable home ownership being the concept of creating both social and economic equity within the community. Very importantly, the design we propose exceeds and will respect all the requirements of easements that are put in place benefiting One Hanson, including light and air, off-site loading, generator, and egress. That's relative because the site, when it was purchased in 2015, came with it a zoning lot development agreement. We share a zoning lot with One Hanson. The site was sold as a development site, but we have boundaries to work with and to make sure we respect our neighbor in context, architecture, and design, working around these easements. And next, the project highlights expansion of Brooklyn Music School, creating an educational cultural hub, a base to serve underprivileged youth across Brooklyn and New York City. Shelby will talk more, but more than 3/4 of the students are at no pay, meaning there's social equity to this. The unique affordable home ownership, while not intended, landmark districts have created barriers to affordable housing. This is an opportunity through a vacant lot to create the home ownership. And really important to us and to the community is to create a respectful and appropriate mixed civic character from this development within the neighborhood. And with that, I'll pass it along to Dan so he can explain the development from the ground up.
Thank you, Brian. This is an overview of the site from the air. The red is the development site, and the yellow is the zoning site, and which Brian referred to before. We are proposing this upzone to infill the vacant site. Its density at a transit-rich location. It provides home ownership, as Brian said, and will provide 20,000 square feet of expansion for Brooklyn Music School. Shelby will talk about that momentarily. As Brian also mentioned, we've been at this trying to find a very balanced development proposal. 2016 with a different architect. 2018 we got involved, and there was a number of stakeholder discussions. Here is the proposed building, and still deemed to be too tall, 750, 370 feet. And our proposal today is a respectful height that is at the shoulders of One Hanson Place and is at a more modest development site. Quickly, you all are very familiar with what's happening around the site, but this is a drawing my office put together showing the two bridges at the water going all the way up Flatbush to the park. The development that has happened in downtown Brooklyn and our site is this little red sliver. It's no surprise that development has happened here. The rezoning basically recognized the fact that this part of downtown Brooklyn is a transit rich, and actually historically, this has been the case also. One Hanson and 67 and 62 Hanson were all built as part of when the Long Island Railroad lines came in, and it was really established that. And they really form a real part of the historic district personality. This is an aerial of the historic district. Our site is in here. It's a polyglot. Really there's the brownstones. There's those two buildings I talked about already that were really the high rises around the transit, the church, and the BAM, civic and cultural complex. You know the site very well. It's a beautiful set of architecture around it, including BAM Fisher, the church, the townhouses, and the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower. This is Brooklyn Music School. It was really amalgamation of 4 townhouses that got put together, and that townhouse scale is something that's important to us. We want to recall. It was also very important to us to come up with a use that extended in the historic district, the civic and cultural uses of BAM, of Brooklyn Music School, of the church, and that's one of the key drivers why Brooklyn Music School needed to expand and was so appropriate to be on the west side of St. Felix. Today, this is the site. On the left is it's a parking garage. This is from Ashland. These are the 2 generators. These are all, we'll get into that in a moment. This is a vent that needs to be preserved. And on the right, this is also showing the the parking garage. There's windows on the west side, east side that need to be maintained in a sort of light and air easement. As Brian described, there's a whole bunch of easements that came with the sale. We are respecting or even going beyond all those. Those are the windows I talked about, the generator, the vent. But what was not covered in the easements and that we are proposing to maintain is on the north side, there is a band of windows that we are keeping open. So our design proposal, we wanted to create an ensemble with the two buildings. The church and the tower were designed by the same architect and built within 2 years of each other, and we want to be the third element in that complex. We want to establish an appropriate scale of the St. Felix Street street wall, and there's a north lot line facade. So that's very prominent, that needs to be carefully designed. So this is a step up of the proposal. St. Felix is in the foreground, Hanson, the church. So the first thing is the 2 floors of the music school, plus there's a below grade floor. As then we set back 15 feet to establish that townhouse concept scale. Then we set back 20 feet from the south to preserve the view of those windows from the easement. And we set back 5 feet to start the wedding cake of the building. On the Ashland Street, Ashland frontage, place frontage, we set the building back 48 feet. That preserves these line of windows here. And then as we go up, we continue to step up further and create a gap between the proposed building and One Hanson so that One Hanson could really stand free as much as possible. And then on the on looking northwest, there's further stepping of the building. So in scale, this is the church, that's the tower, and ours is the scale in between. When we looked at how to treat this building architecturally, we've really discovered there's really like 2 different colors and material flavors. There's One Hanson, BAM, and BMS in the sort of limestone zone, and the church, the townhouses, and Fisher in the more of the brownstones. And as we started thinking about how this third building could both relate to the church and to One Hanson, we looked at a sort of a fade between tan to brown. And what that allowed us to do was keep all 3 buildings talking to each other, but they maintain their individual identities, so that the tower was tan versus the brown of the top of our proposed building, and at the base we were tan as opposed to the brown of the church. But then it also allowed us to make basically a very direct connection with BMS. We also looked very carefully at the existing building and picked up on some of the architectural cues. We basically have east and west facades that are more in the vertical mode of One Hanson, and then the north and south more in the quieter lot line with shadows of party walls. At the base, we've looked at a glazed terracotta, scalloped glazed terracotta spandrel to create interest and really shadow and scale. So here it is. Now I'll go through a series of before and afters, but before I do that, here it is in context. Low church, medium building, high tower. A little closer, you see the coloration difference between the church and the tower, the setbacks, the texture of the lot of the south wall really relating to One Hanson, but the gap and the coloration difference allowing them to stand free. So with that, these are we call before and afters, and shows photorealistically what the building will feel and look like in its context. So this is Flatbush looking north. You can see a little bit of the arena. And so this is the proposed building in the middle of the screen. The future towers are ghosted in. Looking down 4th Avenue, basically the new building in the blue is completely obscured by One Hanson, preserving this iconic view. Looking south along Ashland and Fulton, BAM Stefana, One Hanson. And I think this is really where our thesis comes most into play. We've really kept the One Hanson freestanding, if you will. We've peeled back the building. We've created daylight between the proposed building and One Hanson, and we've changed the color so that there is a contrast. From Hanson looking and Fort Greene Place, before and after, similar situation with the coloration and the gap of daylight. Flatbush, before, sneaking in the corner, just rounding it out with street level views, St. Felix Street base, and then I'll go to Ashland. This is looking north along St. Felix, the brownstones on the right, the church on the left, BMS, and we're proposing a residential entrance here and the BMS entrance a little further down. I think that's clear from the north looking south. Again, the church, the development site, and BMS to the right. And here you can really see that the street wall of BMS really picks up on the cornice line. The building sets back 15 feet, then rises up, then sets back again. The entrance to the school is in a terracotta fin design. We had been here to you all in person, not virtually, in December, and showed you this rendering, which showed a more glassy effect. And thank you for your input. We have gone back to the drawing board and created really a quieter, subtler, I think more appropriate entrance with these fins. Finally, before I turn it over to Shelby, I want to just talk you through the Ashland base. There are two schemes for Ashland. There's a preferred option, which really I'll show you in 3D in a moment, but really has 2 stories along Ashland, including a second floor of BMS. And the fallback option is really a 1-story screen wall. The only reason we would do option 2 is option 1 works with all of the required easements and requirements for One Hanson. It just requires a temporary emergency generator. That's not possible for technical reasons. We will use the fallback, but our preferred and primary option is option 1. So with that, this is the street view along Ashland. Here you can really see our proposed base architectural language. Brick piers with a limestone base, glazed terracotta spandrels in a concave spandrel pattern, BMS on the second floor with their nice windows overlooking the Flatbush, an entrance for BMS, and a perforated metal garage door. If we cannot achieve the technical issues with the generator, we will do the same architectural vocabulary, but in a 1-story piece along that way. Here it is from the opposite way, looking south, Bam Fisher, our proposed building. You can see what a nice presence BMS has on this sort of important view. And then One Hanson's architecture to the south. And then again, the fallback if the technical issues are non-surmountable. So I will turn it over to Shelby. I'm sure there'll be questions afterwards, and I'm happy to go over everything.
Dan, it's Brian. One quick thing before Shelby proceeds is, again, I want to clarify that this is a precursor to the ULURP application, which we would expect to submit later in the year. The LPC process is required first to ensure the bulk and envelope and the design of the building provides a framework for a ULURP as well as the environmental review. So the certificate of appropriateness, sort of in sequence of events, is the critical path before the actual ULURP. So I just want to make sure we're clear to the board of sort of how this will flow process-wise through the government agencies. And with that, we'll go to Shelby.
Shelby, you might be on mute. Shelby, I think it's hard to hear you, Shelby. I think try again.
Shelby, you came off of mute and there you go.
Okay. Thank you.
We hear you now.
Well,
We can hear.
all right. Okay, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes to remind you of what the Brooklyn Music School has been to the community, what it's doing now, and what this project means to BMS in fulfilling its mission. It's been around for more than 110 years, and it served as an anchor in the community where both accomplished and aspiring artists come to learn and to grow. Its founding principles were equity and inclusion, meaning that it believed that access to music instruction was a birthright of all. And the school has kept to that those ideals. More than 90% of its more than 6,000 students today receive music instruction at no or reduced cost. And more than 60% of its students are at or below the poverty level. The student body, faculty and staff, and even the Board of Trustees also reflects the mixed demographics of the community. And more than 60% of students identify as people of color, and more than half the faculty does also. And the school offers every kind of instruction in all genre of music and arts. But it's so popular that it's bursting at the seams. It has experienced more than 27% increase in growth over the last 4 years. And performances at the Playhouse are very, very popular. So this new space will mean doubling performance and rehearsal space available to the school. It will enable the school to offer a digital music lab and allow music production. And it would also involve making the space more accessible to persons of all abilities. And the project will allow the BMS to contribute to the community in another way as well, as Brian suggested, by offering affordable housing. So we hope that you will support what we believe to be a project that offers many kinds of community benefits.
Thank you. That's our presentation. I turn it back over to the chair. Look forward to your questions.
So that was an excellent presentation, and I thank you all for being efficient and thoughtful of time as you made the presentation. It was excellent. I hope that we didn't cause you to make a decision to leave anything material out, but it seems like the presentation was well laid out. So let me just say thank you. Mr. Gordon, as chair, I'll begin with you. For the presentation.
Not so much on questions, some of the commentary. From the community, from neighbors or neighboring buildings about the proposal. I think now every considers themselves, and I think probably on the board as well, I could say, everybody considers themselves a supporter of the Brooklyn Music School, and they want to see the Brooklyn Music School succeed. So to that extent, I think that you can get almost 100% support on the fact that something should be done to help support the Brooklyn Music School. Now, we did get one comment in favor of the full proposal from, I think it's the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, and I think they supported it wholly. Most comments that we received at the board, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, starting with the proposed project. Most felt that this would not fit, or at least especially because of the height, it would not necessarily go along with what the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District would be. Now, the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District is mostly, from what I could see, moderate rise, buildings. Would this fit in contacts with the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District, even project. That's one question. I also received from Karen Johnson, who's our committee, our landmark land use committee secretary. And she had a concern that because of the largeness or the bulk of the property, that so many families will be moving into that spot, and it may affect not just the Brooklyn Music School, but would affect schools in general, that you have so many families coming into that spot that may really have a heavy, a heavy amount of children who would be living in that building, and which is normally a good thing, but it could affect the school, whatever schools that would be, available or sent right at that location. So those are things that are a concern. The height is the biggest concern. I think we received several commentaries on that, and almost every commentary was concerning about the height of the property. Okay, go ahead.
Can I pose a question? Hello?
I hear.
Hi. I'm here with my wife. We live at 119 St. Felix, right across from the school. We're curious about what the plan is for the old music school building if this new building happens and the all the school transfers to the new building.
Well, I can answer that. Sorry.
Go ahead, Shelby. You should answer.
Shelby is on mute.
Shelby, you're on mute again. Sorry.
Okay. The plan is to renovate the existing buildings in a phased process as soon as the new facility is constructed, and to allow offering more instructions and all different kinds of programs, and to also renovate the playhouse in the existing structure as well. So those plans are ongoing as we're moving forward with the new building.
So the music school would occupy both spaces, the new space and the old space, when all the construction is complete?
Yes, and the playhouse will be done as well.
I see.
Is Gotham then involved in the renovation of the old current building as well as the construction of the new building?
So let me do this because I don't want to take away from the flow of the meeting. The chair of the Landmarks Land Use Committee gave an overview of comments that have come in. I'm hopefully that Jessica as
Yeah.
Chair, it's Brian Kelly from.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Hold on. Hold on a second. Committee. No, not any questions. Hold on. Not answer any questions. We'll do this orderly. I'm not looking for comments from public. So please hold on. Don't answer any questions. Shelby. Listen. Stop.
Yes.
Stop.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm not looking. Hello, can everyone hear me? Hi, this is Turkey. Can you hear me? I'm not. This is me. I'm not comments on the community chat. I'm not on the community chat. This is an executive committee meeting, so I need to follow the protocol of allowing my colleagues who sit on the executive committee meeting to answer questions, and you get to listen in. And I don't mean this to be disrespectful until I acknowledge you to speak. That way, it allows us to keep control of the minutes, so we know who asked questions from the committee and who asked questions from the community. Because I heard a lot of dialogue, but no one introduced themselves. At least I didn't catch that part. So with all due respect, if you allow me to ask the committee members to ask questions, then we'll find our way to circle back to the community. While I do have everyone's attention, do not misinterpret what I'm suggesting. Everyone from the community will not get an opportunity to ask a question and speak on this. That's not going to happen because we need to keep this orderly. What I suggest is that anyone who's not called upon this evening and who may have a question, if you forward your questions and comments to the district office, we will keep a catalog of those questions and make sure that they follow through along with this project so that you can get an answer and you can keep abreast of your concerns. Are we clear? All I need is a simple yes or a nod of a head.
Yes.
Okay, great,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Jessica, the question I have for you is when Mr. Gordon was giving a synopsis of information that was communicated to him and through information that came through his committee, were you able to capture that in the minutes?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great. Any other executive committee members of Community Board 2 who may have questions on the presentation?
This is Juliet too.
Okay, so let me go with Barbara first, Juliet, and then Bill in that order.
Let me just say, I was going to ask the question about the use of the present building going forward. So thank you for answering.
Hey, Barbara, can you
need to speak up. You need to speak up, Barbara.
All right, I just wanted to mention, I was planning to ask the question about what the existing building, what would happen to the existing building after the fact. I have two other questions. On this new proposal for this building, where the mixed use, will there be market rate apartments and mixed use apartments on the same floors?
Chair, it's Brian Kelly from Gotham. Can I answer?
Yeah, Brian, you can answer.
Okay. So the development will include the 120 up to 120 homes. The affordable and market rate homes would be interdispersed in accordance with HPD guidelines. That means they're not located with bias to sightline. The affordable homes cannot all be located on one floor. They're equitably distributed based on the HPD design guidelines, and that's, for example, no more than 1/3 of any units on any floor could be affordable. That's an example. And then two other things are in terms of support. The chair will receive, but there are letters of support from ABNY, Building Congress, 32BJ, Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Brooklyn Arts Alliance. So just for the record, there will be more than a half a dozen letters submitted. The testimony was expected to be provided live. Lastly, there was a question earlier about height and what does that mean for total number of units and therefore school children. Those type of environmental impacts will be addressed during the ULURP process, and that will be studied in an environmental assessment. So this proposal tonight was to go over, architecture and building form, but it was a good question.
I had one other quick question. Have we received anything from BAM, either in support or against this proposal?
We did give BAM an overview before he left because he retired, but we'll have a follow-up with BAM, but the feedback was positive.
Thank you, Brian. Juliet?
Thank you. I am wondering if you're proposing any more affordable housing than is required under mandatory inclusionary housing, and if you could explain to us what income levels not in terms of AMI, but in terms of actual income levels are proposed to be served.
Sure. Under MIH, there's 4 options. We are proposing what's called the workforce option, which fits best with home ownership. And we are providing a deeper skew than that option requires. It would be 5% of the units at 70% AMI from an income level, depending on the household size. That's incomes from 52,000 to 78,000. So that could be at 78,000, 2 or 3 earners in one household on the high side. Then 5% at 90% AMI, depending on household size, that's 60,000 to 89,000. Again, the 89,000 could be up to 3 income earners. And then 20% at 100 AMI, which is adjusted for households 75,000 to 110. So a typical example, 20% at 100 AMI with that $75,000 to $110,000 income. That could be a teacher and a bus driver. That could be a waiter and a social service worker. It could be there's various combinations that are reflective of moderate income, working class to be able to qualify. At the end of the day, the end calculation is those households can't spend more than 30% of their income on their common area charges, which any homeowner has, and their mortgage payments. So it's ultimately programmed to make it affordable based on HUD guidelines. Hope that answered the question.
Illinois.
Juliet just asked one of my questions. The other question I have is,
So you need to speak up.
Juliet already answered one of my questions. My other question is basically, when is the ULURP plan?
Bill, I lost you. Were you just asking for the ULURP schedule?
That is correct. I was asking for a ULURP schedule. Yes.
So we've been in process with city planning, but only for a pre-application statement and then the reasonable worst case development scenario. The next step would be an EIS and the actual ULURP application. Our expectation is to produce those documents by some point later this year, whether it be end of the summer or early fall. Considering the environmental review takes at a minimum months, I don't anticipate we would be in an actual ULURP process until 2021. So we'll be back in front of this board.
Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, Lenny, it's Jessica. Just a quick one. It's really more for Carlton. Carlton, because of the kind of scope of feedback that we got, I'm wondering if you could just very quickly explain what we're voting on tonight for the record as distinct from that ULURP. I mean, we know the difference, but I do think it's helpful for people to hear what this piece of the puzzle is versus what comes later.
This piece of the puzzle would just be, will this be considered proper for a landmark preservation, a certificate of appropriateness? Would this be appropriate in the historic district, in this case, the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District? I think where some of the questions came up was, would this building be appropriate in this historic district? And that's what we'll be voting on. This will actually proposed building be appropriate for this in this particular historic district.
Thank you.
Any other question from board members?
I have one question. Bill Flournoy. Can you hear me okay?
Lean in a little more.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can.
Okay, excellent. The question I was going to have now is, right, how high can this building actually be built?
Okay, so this is Dan from FX Collaborative. This building really from a zoning point of view, as of right, under the rezoning, would have unlimited height. However, the certificate of appropriateness and the special controls that will be imposed during the ULURP will limit it to the design that you see in front of you. It won't be, it cannot go any higher. The setbacks will have to be crafted so that they are very specific to the landmarks approved design. Yeah, Chairperson, do you mind if I just address the height issue?
Yeah, we'd like to hear about the height issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I know there's a lot of questions about the height, and I hoped I had addressed it in my initial presentation, but it's, we design a lot of buildings in historic districts, and I always come to the table with, like, what would a architect who was working around the time of the other buildings, how would they approach the building? How would they approach the design of the building? And in this case, it's a very unique situation, is that the same architect designed the tower and the church. And what we thought was the best and most appropriate was to create a mid-ground between the two, and something that would form an ensemble, as if, it was the same office, and then the site next door is available, and really create an ensemble. And we spent a lot of time and architectural thought and looking up three-dimensional models and renderings and so forth to determine the appropriate height. And at the end, the two things that really sealed it for us is, one, keeping it below the shoulder of One Hanson, and two, and I think this is very important, is pulling the tower away from the streets in a way that really makes it much more gentle on the pedestrian experience. I really think what we've proposed here is quite appropriate. So I do appreciate the time and space to say that.
Juliet, I have another comment. Negative FAR of the site, something that we heard from some of the letters that came in. When you say that you could have built an unlimited height, I don't want people to be misled, because my understanding is that as of right, there is no FAR that could have been used to build anything. Perhaps you could speak to that. Like, right, what we're talking about here is approving the bulk of a building that currently couldn't have been built.
Okay, so that thank you for that distinction. When I referred to what could be built as of right, it would be under the as of right condition with the rezoning. What can be, you're correct in that currently the site is the parking lot itself and One Hanson, and it does not include Brooklyn Music School. So, and under the current zoning, you're right, there's a negative FAR on the site.
Are there any other questions from board members?
Mr. Secretary, just had one. Maybe I missed this, but all of the affordable housing would be on that one site?
Yeah, so there would be, correct, all in this building, one front door, one doorman, access by everybody to the same amenities, units distributed through the building. So it's a tremendous opportunity for moderate income households to put their footprints down in the neighborhood and build beyond social equity, economic equity, and that instead of paying their landlord rent every month, they get to amortize a moderate small mortgage, and create liquidated value in that property for themselves. So if they stay in their home 10, 15 years, they're getting the benefit of being a homeowner versus paying rent. So that's a tremendous attribute to the affordable homeownership concept. I can also say, since we've been at this for a while, we've met with a lot of different groups, whether it be a conservancy, whether it be a park-related entity, whether it be a cultural arts organization. From a global perspective, sort of Brooklyn-focused groups, citywide groups, the reception to this has been very positive. I can understand on the flip side that people who may live next door or around the block felt like their view forever was going to be, perpetually available on all four sides to the end of, the face of the earth. And I think we have to look at the moment in crisis we are in New York City of what does it take to create progress. And this creates an opportunity for Brooklyn Music School, who's laid the groundwork for more than 100 years in Brooklyn, for youth to expand, not shrink, to monetize the value of air rights, to own and build out their facility, and to create affordable home ownership without use of public capital, meaning not requesting direct subsidy of the affordable home ownership opportunities. So I think when we all sort of take a step back of what could this create, we realize it's a 285-foot building, but we looked at it sensibly and how we wedding cake this, how we respected our neighbors. But how do you ultimately, in a moment of crisis, create something for the greater good? And we think this strikes that happy balance, that happy medium.
So this is Lenny. Let me kind of move this along. So unless there are other board members who have not already asked a question, I want to move this along so we hear from the public. And I'm going to ask for 5 questions from members on the call who are not from the community board, who's not part of the executive committee, to ask questions. Once again, 5. But before I do that, Bill, when you were speaking just now, you mentioned about ways to be inclusive and ways to help at a time of crisis. And I believe another presenter also used the term inclusive. In that same context, what efforts have been made to reach out to the community that are not part of, let's say, business groups that are advocacy for different larger scale initiatives in the district? I'm talking about grassroots, kitchen pocketbook neighbors who may be affected or in close proximity to the project. What level of outreach have we had there?
So in terms of, yes, we've met with some of the business-focused entities that want to see economic development, but we've also met with the Fort Greene Park Conservancy. We've met with Mokata. We've met with the Fulton Area Business Alliance, which is really important for small businesses in the neighborhood.
Let me cut you off. I don't want to be rude. I get the businesses. What I'm talking about is non-businesses, residential, people who live close proximity to the project. Non-business representatives. I'm talking about just actual residents who live in close proximity. People who may live in brownstones.
So the idea behind the meeting to cohesively and strongly communicate what the development was and is we had the meeting in December for a public meeting, which we voluntarily came to the board and said, we'd like to present this project to the community so that homeowners on St. Felix, folks in the neighborhood, would have a seat at the table to see what we're proposing. And I stated in that meeting, what we don't want to do is show up when there's just official action to take, such as a ULURP. So, we created a teaser website, an informational website, St. Music, we can post it to the community board, but stfelixmusicandliving.com. We created an informational website. We held a community board meeting as a follow-up to that informational website going live, so folks are understanding what the development is about. We issued a press release so that all the local periodicals, including major sources of news, could pick it up. So we've aimed to be transparent early on. Can I say I've knocked on everybody's door? I don't know that would be most efficient, but any group that is of interest in meeting with us or figure out how they can collaborate with us in Brooklyn Music School, we're candidly very open to that.
Thank you. So this is going to be a bit challenging. We've never done this before, but I'm going to ask that we do this in a very orderly way. And Rob, can you or Taya to explain to me, is there a way that we can, in a digital format, acknowledge non-members by having them raise their hands? Like, is there a control way of doing this? Because I can't see everybody on the screen in order to recognize who's responding. My screen's not that large.
Can you see the chat questions, Mr. Singletary?
Can I see what again? Chat questions?
Chat questions, if you click on the sort of voice balloon, it should open a window on the side that.
Yeah, I see that.
Lenny, this is Brian Howell. I was wondering if I could get in a question or get in two questions before you went.
Yeah, hold on for me, Brian. I want to try to get the community first. Just hold on for me. So, Rob, I see this chat. I'm looking at this. This doesn't necessarily tell me that people want to do anything outside of a chat. They may not want to speak. So I'm just trying to figure out, outside of the chat, is there any way like you can see someone who's raising their hand? Do we have that functionality?
There is that functionality, and I don't.
Because I see,
I'm not familiar with it.
Like, for example, I see Bill Flournoy raised his hand. I'm not going to call on Bill, but I see he raised his hand. So clearly that feature does exist. And so how do I get to see that with so many people?
Bill, can you share with us how you did that?
Yeah, if you just simply run your what's called your arrow over your name, and should be click on the hand.
All right, so here's what we'll do. Let me just jump in for a second. I see, is it Cassie Carrillo? Am I saying that correctly?
Cassie Carrillo is a representative of the union SEIU 32DJ. They wrote a letter of support, and that was shared with the committee earlier today.
Okay, great. So if you wrote a letter of support, I'll take that as you've had a chance to give comments. So let's see who else raised their hand. I see no one else. Is it? Hopefully everyone knows how to raise their hand. All right, so I'm looking through this functionality now. I do not see anyone else who's raised their hand. Please don't let the chat stop. If you're successfully getting your questions answered through the chat, please continue that way.
Mr. Chairperson, I see that Andrew Last also has his hand raised.
Yeah, he's an exec committee member, so that's Andrew Lastawecki. I'm looking for non-committee members. I'm trying to move this along, so thank you. I appreciate that. So with that, let me jump to Brian Howell. Brian?
Thank you. Two questions. The first one was whether or not there is a plan drawing showing the St. Felix building line in relation to the adjacent buildings. Perhaps I missed that from the presentation.
There, I can provide that if you want me to do it now and share screen, or I could send it in. It's also in the it's in the the landmark submission. So let me know how you want me to do that, Chairperson.
I was just curious whether or not the building will take up more like frontage distance on the sidewalk than the BMS building.
So, okay, good. Happy to answer that question. Currently, so as I mentioned before, BMS was originally built as a series of 4 brownstones, and they had stoops. And when they were combined to create BMS in the teens, the stoops were carved off and those entrances made. The face of the building of BMS is set back 7 feet from the property line. In contrast, the church is built to the property line. We will marry on the south side with the church, and then at the entrance, our new proposed entrance to BMS, we are making the transition from the property line back to the 7 feet so that we get a smooth transition.
Thank you. Raise my hand. And then my other question, I'm trying to do my best to channel my inner John Dew. I'm just curious if
Run that risk tonight. You will get shut down. I can mute you. Go ahead.
well, not the transit with Mr. Dew, not the protesting Mr. Dew.
Don't waste your time. Just go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I'm just curious if there are any sort of improvements to transit at Calb or Nevins or Atlantic that will come as part of this project.
Let me just jump in for a minute, Brian, before you answer that. Keep in mind, everyone, there are certain aspects and great questions like the previous one that will be part of the EIS, and we haven't gotten there yet. This is really about the architectural design. So I don't want to lose sight that the project like this can naturally raise a ton of questions, right? But I want to keep the remaining questions going forward. That part of what's before us tonight that we get to vote on is the design and the architecture. And then some of the questions come in naturally relate to community outreach. But since Brian did ask that question, Bill, if you could respond to that, that would be great.
Sure. Transit improvements or funding to a transit is more customary when there's a density bonus associated with a transit bonus. In this case, the ability to create the zoning floor area is being generated by mandatory inclusionary housing. And ultimately, at what we're able to recoup on sales of those units, we are cross-subsidizing those inclusionary housing units with the market rate homes. So that's essentially the public benefit being created. Brian, since you're talking about also contributions, want to be clear that the relationship we have with Brooklyn Music School is to create a core and shell for Brooklyn Music School, and then to also fit out the facility through the air rights that we purchase from them through the zoning lot development agreement, meaning we're landing their air rights onto our facility. Given the light of fiscal cuts, this is an opportunity where private investment, which the city is going to need, is going to create a cultural hub expansion. So there was a comment earlier that Brooklyn Music School is supported. Of course, who could not love Brooklyn Music School? My own niece, goes to the Halloween event and is interested in signing up for classes. But 20,000 square foot schools don't get built without capital. So this development that includes affordable home ownership is generating economic activity to also create Brooklyn Music School. So you're talking about a building between MIH and Brooklyn Music School where more than 40% of the floor area is essentially non-revenue generating, meaning it doesn't make profit. So this is where, good is created by private investment and revenues generated by the market rate home. So it doesn't go to transit, but it goes to create a school expansion, which otherwise will not get public funding, as well as affordable home ownership. And HPD has massive, massive budget cuts right now.
Okay, great. So now let me take questions that are coming from members of the community. And let me just say this, there are several people who've now figured out how to raise their hand, and I want to say thank you. Those of you who've already submitted testimony, respectfully, I'm not calling on you again to repeat what you've already written. So I see you raising your hand, but I'm not going to do the repeat. What I am going to do is call on members from the community. And so I'm going to start with James Golden, who is a member of the public, member of the public who has raised his hand. So James, are you on and are you unmuted?
I did not mean to raise my hand.
Okay, no problem. We still love you. Next, Lucy Coteen.
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Lucy.
Yeah, well, first I hope that you meet with the residents of St. Felix Street and also the residents of One Handsome Place to get their feedback. You said you met with many of the businesses, but I did not hear you say that you met with the actual residents who have invested their money and and their efforts into creating St. Felix Street the lovely street that it is. But in addition, I'm very concerned about the future of housing, and I'm hearing that many of the middle class will be leaving the city after this COVID epidemic. We have 80 Flatbush right across the street with many, many units of housing, and I am concerned that we will see buildings going up that will remain empty as the middle class leaves the city. And the so-called rich people who have been buying up the expensive buildings will not be interested in New York City in the near future. So my feeling is that it is not appropriate to be building anything new until we get a good assessment of our economic viability and who will be occupying these buildings. As I said, I have been hearing a lot of middle class people are leaving the city. That is the target of a lot of this development. One of the question is, Laurie Cumbo gave over $2 million to the music school, and I'm curious as to how that money is being spent to upgrade the music school.
So it's Brian
Let me
from
jump in.
Gotham.
Brian, hold on. That's a great question, but it has nothing to do with architecture, so we're not going to respond to that.
I did want to provide
Lucy,
one point of clarification.
Hold
is
on,
that
Brian, hold on.
Okay, sorry.
I just want to make sure that we capture Lucy's question in our minutes. It's a good question, but I'm just dealing with appropriateness right now, so we're going to hold that response later. Go ahead, Brian.
With regard to communication with One Hanson, we are not only in communication with One Hanson, the condominium board, and every condo has legal representation. We're in contact with their attorneys, but we have met with board members of the One Hanson building condominium. They represent the interests of One Hanson. That's how they're organized. So firstly, we've presented this project to them in the past. Secondly, is we have given them a copy of our landmarks application, so they have the full application. And thirdly, given the challenging times with communications we're in right now, we did offer a multitude of times to have a Zoom presentation of our application prior to this hearing. So for disclosure, we've been a neighbor that's communicating. That's number one, I think, critical. In regard to the comment about the middle class leaving the city, the affordable home ownership concept is part of attracting and keeping the middle class in the city. We had an affordable housing crisis before COVID, and it will only exacerbate post-COVID. Secondly, it's our risk to spend our capital and build this development, and we're sensible developers. So I think the risk on us for the numbers to pencil is on us, and we can make that decision on how we price the units, how big they are. We'll let the market speak to that. But I think this actually directly addresses the COVID issues at hand.
Okay, so the next question I see, I may not be able to get this correct, but I think the first name is Sean. Is that correct? Your name seems to be all jumbled together, but is the first name Sean? Is that correct?
Shawana?
There you go. I'm sorry, Shawana. Forgive me.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. I meant to change that. Like that would, I guess it came up. It's automatically populated like a username or something, probably from my email address.
That's fine. What's your question?
Question about architecture. I think the building, it looks really, really pretty. As you get the second floor and above, but the perfect garage door and then the small entryway. I just was looking like, is there a way to make it more appealing from street level, rather than having the perforated garage door, but also you don't want to compromise the privacy of the cars, but was there a way to do that? Well, it may be too late because I know you already designed the building. It looks great, but.
So the answer on the Ashland side is the door is required because there is a loading easement that benefits One Hanson. So we need to have a door so that the loading for One Hanson is maintained. We're legally required to do it, and it's also important for the function of One Hanson. But we can take the comment about the materiality as a suggestion, like we did on the St. Felix Street frontage at our last meeting. And based on also how Landmarks reacts to it, we'll keep it in mind as long as it could still function as an operable door.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, so now I need to make an announcement. It's been brought to my attention that this meeting is set up to end promptly at 8 p.m. That was something I wasn't aware of as we started this meeting. So given that it's 7:23 and we've spent a considerable amount of time on this topic, and we have other items on the agenda that we need to cover, let me ask two things. There's a whole host of individuals that have identified themselves through emails to the board office and through this chat that have strong support for the project and strong support for the music school, as was noted by my colleague and the chair of the committee in his opening remarks. I do not want anyone to go away from this conversation thinking that that's not acknowledged. It is, and I fully appreciate all the entities that have been supportive. And also Brian went through a list of people that were supportive. So in totality, don't think that your voice hasn't been heard. It has, but I need to move the meeting along. And so as customary to those who know me, I will apologize in advance that I'm about to be rude, but we're gonna finish this meeting before 8 o'clock. So if anybody has feelings that are hurt, please email me. I'm happy to give you a pre-written apology, but we're gonna move along. So that's it for this part of the conversation on this topic. Mr. Chair, I bring it back to you for a motion on the action that needs to be addressed tonight so that it can go before the Landmarks Preservation Committee for the Certificate of Appropriateness and Application.
All right. I've taken into account both the support for the Brooklyn Music School and the concerns for. My motion would be to approve the project, but with a 12-story height rather than a 24-story height. I feel that that would be more appropriate for the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. It'll be not as overwhelming for the rest of the properties in that historic district, and still will allow a project to go forward, which would be in support of the Brooklyn Music School. So it would be to approve, but at a 12-story height.
Is there a second on the motion? I'm not asking for a vote. I'm just asking for a second.
Second, it's Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Juliet.
Juliet, you had a question?
Discussion wise, I don't think that that would be economically viable, Carlton. While I applaud your efforts to try to maintain the contextuality of the building, I think that they're going to need more height in order to be able to do their 30% affordable housing, 20,000 square feet for the school. I think cutting the building in half would probably make this project not happen. So maybe there's a middle ground that we could be shooting for. I was going to suggest something modest, like, hey, make sure all the mechanicals are within the envelope that all the bulkheads, all the mechanicals are within the bulkhead that they proposed. But maybe there's something, in between those two.
It's Brian, just to clarify, and thank just for the point, our mechanicals.
Brian, I'm sorry, you gotta go on mute. You don't get a chance to speak now. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, this is strictly an executive committee conversation. Any other discussion on the motion?
This is Bill Flanoy. I tend to agree with Juliet also.
Thank you, Bill.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, Bill said he tends to agree with Juliet.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing no other discussion on the motion and not hearing an amended motion, all in favor?
I am in favor.
Mr. Singletary, would you like me to do a roll call?
Yes, Rob, that would be fantastic.
Mr. Singletary, how do you vote?
No, you'll call me last.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, how do you vote?
Me, yes. Gordon, yes.
That was Jordan, not Gordon.
Oh, all right.
Mr. Jordan, are you still with us?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Nay.
Ms. Zeller-Gringer,
No.
Ms. Thurston,
No.
Colin Chung,
No.
Mr. Gordon, you voted yes. Betty Flybush,
No.
Mr. Flanoy,
No.
Brandon Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Singletary.
No.
The motion fails to pass by a vote of 2 in favor, 7 opposed, no abstention.
Right. I'll entertain another motion to accept, I'm sorry, I'll entertain another motion to move the 130 St. Felix Street application as going to the Landmark Preservation Commission for certificate of appropriateness.
And the only other thing I can think we can do is to simply move to approve as presented. So it'll be the full 24 stories.
Is that a question or a motion?
That's my motion. Approve as presented.
Second by Bill Flanoy. Any discussion on the motion?
Can we make sure that the mechanicals are within the envelope that they proposed?
I can accept that as a friendly amendment.
Bill Flanoy here. One of the reasons I asked about the ULURP, when it was actually going to go forward for the ULURP, is because of one of the public members did bring up a point. Currently, right now, we're seeing a lot of individuals who are no longer going to be in the city, and we're also probably going to see a lot of apartments that are going to be on the market. Because of this, I'm not sure if the market rate housing are going to be at a rate that will support the entire building. So what I'm just voting on right now is voting on the building itself. And when they come back for ULURP, we'll see what the conditions are at that point in time.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Rob, roll call vote. Chair votes last.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Ms. Zeller-Gringer,
Yes.
Ms. Thurston,
Yes.
Ms. Colin Chung,
Yes.
Mr. Gordon,
Yes.
Ms. Flybush,
No.
Mr. Flanoy,
Yes.
Mr. Brandon Smith,
No.
Mr. Singletary.
Yes.
The motion passes by a vote of 7 in favor, 2 opposed, no abstentions.
Thank you, everyone, and to everyone that's under the sound of my voice for the participation and for the presentation tonight. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, 163 Bond Street. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. 163 Bond Street. It's in the board. Basically, it's one of those rear yard, back of the building things. They're looking to extend the rear of their building. They want to do also partial width on the 3rd floor. And they want to put in a railing as well towards, which would be in compliance with the code. But basically what they want to do is to extend their rear, the rear of their building a little bit further. It's one of these typical small Bourne Hill brownstone buildings, and they want to extend it into the rear of the further out.
Mr. Singletary, Mr. Gordon, the architect, Sarah Jacoby, is on the call, and she is unmuted.
Hi, do the architects have a presentation for us?
I do.
Okay, can I ask you to be brief and speak up a little bit? You sound real faint.
Yeah, can you hear me? Worse? Better?
Now I can hear you much better.
Great. All right, I will try to go very quickly.
Now, wait. I don't want you to lose any materiality of your presentation. You shouldn't be rushed because another presentation went long. However, do you have a document you want to share with us, or you're just going to speak to us?
No, I can share.
Okay, fantastic.
How do I do that? Share content. Okay, here we go. You see that?
Yes, and could you make it full screen, please?
Yes. If I can. Bad side. Very shrunken. Sorry. Is that all right?
Yes,
That'll have to do.
it'll do. That's
Yeah.
fine.
So it's 163 Bond Street. It's located in the Borum Hill Historical District. It's, I'm gonna get to the photo. It's between.
Looks like it's by Dean Street.
Yeah. No, Bond between Bergen and Wyckoff. Sorry.
Bergen, oh, Bergen, Wyckoff. Okay, excuse
Yeah,
me.
exactly. So it's a short block right here. I guess they're all these short blocks.
Yes.
It's
It's
a
on the
pretty
short side, yes.
Exactly. So here's a photo of it. There's a city bike here. It's a pretty diverse strip, relatively, architecturally speaking. So we're right in the middle of a little row. We'll get some closer photos of it. This one has already been pre-landmarking, had some work done on it, and we're right in the middle, 163. So what we're proposing, yeah, sorry.
Proposals for the rear, it doesn't affect the front or the street side of the building.
Exactly. We're going to replace the windows with historical windows, but no work, repair work. So we're replacing the windows, we'll repair the cornice, but there'll be a 12-foot addition at the back and an addition on the roof that's set back with mechanicals on the top and a deck. The existing building's 36 feet, so it'll now be 41, 42. So here's the plot plan. Again, an existing 2-story building with a cellar, and we're going to be doing an addition at the back and on the top in the deck. Here's our little plan.
Doing an extension, just need to know if you've notified the neighbors on either side that there will be this construction that could affect their properties as well.
Yes, we've spoken to them both. We're very early in the process, but yes, they're both aware that we're going to be doing the work for sure.
I'm sorry, this is Lenny again. Can I just jump in for a second? In fairness to you, Sarah, as you're giving your presentation, can I ask everyone, including the chair, to hold their questions? That way you can go through your presentation in its entirety, and then we can add questions at the end. I just want to be fair to Sarah like we were to the previous presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, we've spoken. So there'll be no work in the cellar. The addition will be on the 3 existing floors, and we'll be going up a story, creating a new 3rd floor. So it's basement for a 2nd and a new 3rd that'll be set back, and the deck on the back. So these are the views of the front, which we won't be changing. By code, as you mentioned, we have to have a railing. This is sort of, you know, you'll never see it like this because it is set back, but it'll be a brick full story on the top, and the rear will be brick as well, all the way up. So this is the existing condition. This is the 2 neighbors. We're the middle house. So this one had work done as well, but is still maintaining the street line, which we're hoping to maintain as much as possible. And these 2 slightly taller buildings on either side. Just a close-up of what it is. We'll be replacing the windows to go to the arched window, but that's about it on the front. Cornice, the original building. Again, we're just going back to the arches, maintaining the existing condition as much as possible on the existing facade. Again, just looking at it some more. Not so much to say about it. So you'll see, you know, here's the building from the corner. So you will see a little bit of it, but very, very minimally because of the way these larger buildings are on either side. The main thing we wanted to point out is that at the rear, which this is 161, which is the larger building, which comes out, which has had the work done on it. So our building is not coming out as far as that, but because there is an empty lot.
Not an empty lot, it's a garage.
Because there's a parking, excuse me, here, you will be able to see the back of our railing through the cars, presumably. So that's sort of our most visible point, will be on Wyckoff there. So again, this is the newer building that will be right behind. We're not coming out as far as that, but you will see the back of our deck, presumably, if none of the cars were here. In real life, I think the visibility will be not so strong, but that's our sort of moment. So here's 163, sorry, that was 165. And this is 161, which is, so this was the existing 3, but 165 has had already a rear addition and a rooftop addition as well. But we will be coming out, not quite as far as 165, but the deck will be almost as far. So this is sort of the existing rear yard. It's pretty deep. This is the 165 next to it, the newer building that will be moving alongside. This is the roof condition. So we will be coming taller than this building when we go up. Again, here we are. Work at the back. So yeah, once we come out, this is 165, the deeper one. We'll be adding the gray. That's our 12 feet in there. And with our deck, we're basically flush with the adjacent building, but our actual building will not come out. So again, what you'll be able to see from Wyckoff will be the stair in the corner of the deck through the parking area. And then we just have some zoom ins to the plans, but I don't think there's anything particularly exciting. This will be the rear, this is the existing rear view, these 2 lower ones. So we will come up higher with the addition of the code required railing. This is the rear view. So we are going up in height, a full story. This is the section. So again, it is coming back, it is set back, as we do want to minimize as much as possible the view from the street and not call attention to ourselves to the extent possible. And that's the deck at the back. So it is, getting larger. We've been there about 10 years and there are more of them than there were. So this is sort of the comparable at the back. Again, we're going up, feeding ourselves to some degree. And the mechanical, you won't be able to see from the street. We can set that back far in the building, but you will be able to see, from certain points along the street, the top of the addition for sure, minimally, which will be brick. There we are. I didn't speed too much. That's all I got right now.
Okay, how many feet are you extending it?
It's a 12-foot addition.
All right.
Hi, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, I think that's all I have right now, unless
Okay, great, thank you.
missed something important.
And I don't have anything else, Lenny.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the application to the Landmarks Preservation Commission Certificate of Appropriateness for 163 Bond Street.
I move to approve as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second, Mr. Singletary.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Any discussion on the motion from board members?
Yes, I was wondering if the architect has rendering of what the rooftop would look like from, I'm not sure what street it is. It's not the Bond Street, it's the opposite street.
Don't have any photorealistic renderings. No, I mean, you will see a couple feet at the top of the railing and the brick, but we don't at the moment have any views.
Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question, Lenny. Hi, Cheryl.
Yeah, I can hear you, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Okay, I live on Wyckoff Street, so I know exactly the building they're talking about. This is a building we looked at years ago before we bought our house in Wyckoff Street. Question for you. that 161 is huge. It comes back really way back. When 161 was being done, they went through that parking lot to do all the work. How are you going to get the work done? Are you going to be going only through 163? Or are you going to ask the condo for access and ask 161 for access to do your work? Because that was a major catastrophe when they did 161. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the current owners had mentioned that's how they did that building. Our current plan is not to do that. I mean, to go through 163. I mean, work is done all the time in Brooklyn, walking through the existing building. So the current plan is not to go through the parking access, but to go through 163 itself. And
okay, I was looking at it today, and I said, okay, if you're not going to come as far back as 161, then we wouldn't see it. We wouldn't see your back, only your extension to the top, the third floor you're putting on. You might probably just see that a little. I have no complaints about it, but I was just wondering, how are you going to do all that work without getting access?
All right, so any other questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question. From Betty Flybush, on the view from Bond Street, looking straight at the building, I didn't catch any drawing of what we would see in the way of height. And I'd also like to know, did you speak with the neighbors across the street from 163 Bond Street who would be looking at the building?
we haven't talked to the neighbors across the street. I mean, you'll see, if you crane your head up, you'd see it. You know, straight on, it'll be pretty hard to see. The places it'll be most visible from would be, you know, here basically, you know, kind of further down, not on Bond, but on the other corner of Wyckoff. I don't think it'll be very visible from, you know, directly across the street. I mean, on the upper stories it will, of course, or not of course, but it will. But we haven't yet spoken to them, no.
Yeah, because there are people that live across the street and they live in a historic district.
We're happy to talk to them. That wasn't not trying to leave them out.
I would say, given that I lived in Borum Hill, most of the effect will be more from the rear than from the front. I mean, it's I was living in Borum Hill. It took me years to realize that there was something behind a lot of those buildings. When you're on the facades at the front, it's almost everything is really covered over by every little building that's there. So any work that's done usually towards the rear or the top, you really don't see it coming from the street side or from across the street towards another building. It's pretty much cut, you know, all together very close. And so you wouldn't really see much going on at the rear if you're looking across the street.
Thank you.
Please.
Go ahead, Bill, speak up.
Call the question, please.
Was there anyone else who had a question while we're in discussion? Okay, great. All in favor? Actually, no, sorry. Rob, let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Ms. Ottergringer,
Yes.
Ms. Thurston,
Yes.
Ms. Juliet Cohen-Chung,
Yes.
Mr. Gordon,
Yes.
Flybush,
Yes.
Noy,
No, and you know why.
I do know why, and I will include that in the letter. Mr. Brandon Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Singletary.
Yes.
The motion passes by a vote of 8 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstention.
Great, thank you. If you're looking along in the agenda, we're moving on to the next page. I see an item here for street seats application. Address is 274 Hall Street. That looks like Wassaloon Diner. Matthew Hamilton is the co-owner.
Mr. Singletary, Mr. Hamilton made numerous assertions that he had made this application, as in past tense. However, a check with the Department of Transportation revealed that he has not made a application, and when confronted with that information, agreed that yes, that is the case.
Okay, all right. Not sure how to respond to that. Let's move on to conversation of Water Street between Old Fulton Street and the bend in the road from the two-way traffic to a one-way westbound. I'm sure we some of us recall this. I think this was the last thing we discussed when we all got together. And so, Rob, is there any information that you want to share with us regarding this application?
Committee, so there was a lot of support from both the Fulton Ferry Landing Association and the Dumbo Action Committee. They presented to the Transportation Committee in November. This went to a full board vote where the board voted unanimously 39 to 0. The committee asked DOT to analyze the conditions, and DOT replied that they did so and agreed with the community board and the community's suggestion that this one block be made one way like the rest of the street. And they are asking for the community board's okay to proceed to implementation.
So would not okay be the unanimous vote?
Well, to be honest, DOT would prefer that this be done with a single vote, but the way Community Board 2 has historically done this is vote to request a study and then vote on the results of the study. So we are now in that second phase.
All right, so here's what I'll say, right? And I'm only trying to be efficient here. I'm that one who says, you know, because we've always done it, that we continue to do it. I believe in looking at things in the current matter, but we voted unanimously. Like I don't think there's need for us to now have the exec committee vote unanimously. And I hate, excuse me, committee members for being presumptuous, but if we voted once unanimously, why would we vote again now? So you have my full support to write a letter saying we're in support of the study because it didn't contradict the vote of the committee. Do I hear any objections to my statement?
Fine.
All right, so for me, we're up to the chairperson's report. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, chairperson's report. Part of why I had been, two reasons why I had been a little delayed in allowing, well, not allowing, that's too strong of a word, in support of having committee meetings, because I knew technology was going to be a bit of a challenge and we needed to work through some kinks. The board office wasn't at full capacity. Well, now that we are, I would like to announce that in the month of June, I'd like for all committees to effectively have committee meetings using the WebEx technology that we have in place today. I ask that as each of you as chairs and co-chairs, please be patient with the office as they set up your respective meetings. You should not make the presumption that your liaison is then going to be the host for your committee meeting. So for example, I see Carol Ann's lovely face in my window. If Carol Ann is the liaison for your committee, you should not make the presumption that she's going to be the host for your meeting. It may require the resources of other board members who are a little bit more familiar with the functionality of this tool, because this is the tool that's been recommended to the city agencies. So just exercise patience. I think now we're starting to get the hang of this. I will remind everyone that as we have committee meetings during the month of June, it is important that everyone must register to receive the link to engage and be participant in the meeting. That's a very needed security measure. And that helps us keep from having people just photobomb or jump in. Now, nothing's foolproof because I suspect that people could forward the information. But at least if you do, it gives the board office an opportunity to verify and acknowledge that you should be in a meeting, in which case you will then receive the link and be accepted into the meeting. So we will meet. I expect all of the chairs and co-chairs to work with the office to be able to set up meetings as per the normal schedule, a relative schedule that is. And I hope that everyone has a good and efficient meeting because there could be a lot of items to catch up on, or there may not be. at least we can say that we engaged as we were according to with this new technology. And then as customary with the way Community Board 2 has been functioning, we would then go into our summer recess for July and August, in which case if there's anything that comes up, as is the custom and has been approved, we would act on behalf of the full board. Any questions?
Let me just make sure that you, I guess you guys also have the emails for the public members, especially since our secretary is a public member.
So for that question, Carlton, the board office would treat the virtual meetings the same way they would as the in-person meetings, and whatever notices that would go out the same way.
Okay.
Because that would be the only way for those individuals to communicate to the board and to the host that they would receive acceptance into the virtual room. So we'll follow through on that.
Thank you, Lenny.
Question, Lenny.
Yes, Bill.
Sir. There are some individuals who are not computer literate. What are we going to do with those individuals? They don't even have email.
So for those who don't have email, if you happen to know who the members are on your respective committees who don't have email, I would suggest, so that we don't lose interpretation and have everybody trying to answer questions that may be correct or may not, advise those individuals to call the board office, and together we'll find a solution that will help them get to the meeting. That doesn't mean that it may be something that's acceptable to them, but remember, we have limited options because we're limited to technology and distancing.
These meetings all have phone numbers that people could call into too.
So I'm sorry, Brendan, repeat that.
Mentioned that the meetings all have phone numbers that someone could call into from a regular phone in the event that that for some reason they couldn't use a computer.
Yeah, there is the functionality to be listen only, so that functionality exists as well. And so that's why I said the board office would be the best conduit to communicate that to those who are computer savvy or those who may not be. Good question, Bill. Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, so the somebody from the district office will be assisting so that as the chair of my committee, I won't have to also moderate the technology.
So someone will assist you, Betty, the same way they've assisted me. I've not pressed a button since I've been running this meeting or the previous meeting.
Fabulous. Excellent. Thank you.
That's part of why we took so long, because I wanted to work the kinks out so that you could be hands-free and be the queen that you are for the committee.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Okay, great. So that concludes my report. I'll turn it over to the district manager.
Almost caught up on a written report. Hope to have it out in the next few days.
So Rob, while I do have your attention, would you ask the presenters for both presentations tonight under landmarks to send the hard copy of their respective presentations updated? Because I think in some of the comments I referenced, one or two individuals suggested that maybe the information wasn't current. And in that way, could you distribute it to the respective committees and the executive committee?
I can do that. I think the comment with regard to 130 St. Felix Street is that the renderings on the architect's website are not up to date. But I will get copies of both the presentations. And I note for everyone that shortly before the LPC hearings, all presentations to the commission are posted to the commission's website, and you can look at any presentation going back several months, if not years, and see what is going to actually be presented to the commission.
Thank you, Bob. Is there any other business before the committee tonight?
Yeah, I would like an update, if any, on like with the status of the city budget and everything else that's going on. Like, is the BQE discussion just gonna go away for a while? Is the JAG discussion just gonna go away for a while? You know, we've heard that there's no attention or interest at this point. So just every so often, if you guys can update us, it would be great.
So that's noted. It's a bit of a wild card for tonight because I'm not sure that there's been much discussion on either of those topics. I think everybody's been full COVID.
Right,
But it's
sure.
duly noted, and as we hear information, or as the board office does a good job of perusing newspapers, both local, city, and global, I'm sure they'll continue to pass that information along. But duly noted, we'll continue to work through that and give everybody an update as information becomes available.
Much appreciated.
Is there any other business before this committee? Okay, great. We're up to portion in the agenda where it's community forum. As I remind everyone, and Jessica, get your stopwatch ready. If there are members who want to speak from the community, you get 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, and then you will have your comments conclude. So, are there any representatives from the community that'd like to speak during this part of the agenda?
I have a hand up.
I have my hand up. Your name?
This is Paul Schreiber.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi there. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. You have 2 minutes, Paul. The floor is yours.
Sure. I'd like to speak to the issue of the use of the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges by pedestrians and cyclists. As a result of the coronavirus, there has been a large decrease in public transit use and a corresponding increase in cycling and walking. Both of these bridges are already at or over capacity for non-motor vehicles. The Brooklyn Bridge is especially problematic due to the number of vendors, especially on the Manhattan side, due to the police presence at a narrow choke point on the bridge, and the number of tourists who are standing around taking photographs, often in the bicycle lane. It would be important for the community board and for the committee to work with the Department of Transportation to provide safe routes through and around these bridges for people as New York City opens up over the next few months.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I know that the minutes and it will reflect your comments. I know that members of our office are on this call, and to the extent that we can initiate a conversation with DOT for the areas that bound within Community Board 2, I think we're more than happy to communicate that. I would also say that from your part, feel free to reach out to DOT as well. I think initiatives like this can garner more traction when the more support we have. And so perhaps this is a great opportunity for us to work together to engage in that level of safety. Thank you. Any other questions from community members during the community forum? Hearing none?
I think Nan Blackshear needs to speak.
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you need to speak up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Real quick, please go to our website, brooklyn-usa.org, for any updates in regards to COVID-19. We have a COVID-19 webpage. We also have a link for people who need items, PPEs, etc. You can fill out a link there. For those who wish to donate, you can also go to this same link. Our office is adapting programming to reach people via video conference, telephone, teleconference, and online means. You can reach the borough president through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also old-fashioned emailing with sending emails to askeric@brooklynbp.nyc.gov. And the only other thing I wish to say is to thank Community Board 2 for posting the vigil for Dr. Georgiana Gloss. We will be doing this. We have been organizing it with her family for tomorrow night at 7 p.m. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. Most of you have it. For those who don't, I won't repeat my email, but you can text me on my cell at 917-743-5529. Thank you.
You, Nan. I also want to just follow up and mention that not only is the borough president and his office and his entire staff been active and engaging in this remote setup, but there are other city agencies that are also functioning in the same capacity, such as the New York City Law Department, and in particular, the Juvenile Delinquency Unit. And so just an example that, you know, the city is still functioning. And this is a great reminder, at least to me, that business as usual doesn't mean business going forward. This used to be a time where you would never be able to do business virtually. And so while I'm always someone who's optimistic, and this pandemic has been really a true strain on human life and human society globally, there are things that we're learning through this. And so it helps you keep the perspective that the glass is half full and not fully empty. So hopefully this will be something that will allow us to collaborate going forward and using as much virtual opportunities and technology as possible. Any other comments from the community before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Before you adjourn, Lenny, I would just like to thank Rob and the staff for doing an excellent job of keeping us posted and everything that's going on. You know, every morning I wake up, I see all these emails. They're just keeping me up to date with what's going on.
So we thank Rob and the staff at the last meeting. I think we thank Rob and the staff different things. You know, the staff is okay. We're not gonna thank them every meeting. I'm joking. I'm only joking. I love the staff. I love the staff. Nothing but love to the staff. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you. Have a good night. Thank you for helping me get past the meeting. It was supposed to end at 8:05. So thank you to the technology powers that let us go 5 minutes over. Good night. Remain safe. Take care. We'll speak to you soon. Chairs, get ready for your meetings in the month of June. Good night.
Good night.
Right.